Danny Castro is a Bronx-based drummer that's dedicated to the Bronx's music scene. And in 5 different bands, he shares a refreshing outlook on life that's nothing short of inspirational. This is the Bronx, and this is B-Sides.
My name is Danny Castro. I'm a Bronx musician, Bronx born and raised. Fortunate enough to play with some of my heroes. Alex Bondarev from Moments Worth, Conversing with Oceans, VHS The Blues, Jutor's Trio. My man Frank DiCasio, I gotta give him a shout out. He's really huge in my life right now.
Right.
And Brian Keefe, we're doing a project called Lords of the Sun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Lords of the Sun. Where did that name come from?
It's funny. It sounds a little boisterous, and it's a very confident name. Brian came up with it, and I remember when he first asked me, I was like, it kind of scared me a little bit. I was like, oh, I wonder how, people would react to that, and what meaning am I going to extract out of it? But Lords of the Sun to me means like just being a shepherd of that element, right? I'm a very kind of spiritual, elemental kind of person. Water is a huge element in my life. Obviously, sunlight is something that we all need, especially during the pandemic. We all realize, we can't be at home with these fluorescent lights. So Lords of the Sun to me is more like, not that we own, the forces of nature, but that we are admirers and shepherds of it. If you ask him what it means, he'd probably say yeah.
Something totally different.
And so Lords of the Sun. So what type of music is it that has it changed your current route as a drummer, or is it the same type of style that you have?
No, not at all. It hasn't changed my current drumming, but it is it's more so like allowing me to tap into a piece of my drumming and a piece of my musical history that I haven't yet. And the music is very 90s grunge inspired.
Very nice.
Not that I haven't, played like rock music and things like that, but I grew up on 90s K-rock and bands like Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, things like that. Lords of the Sun really kind of reflects that aspect of my artistry. And Brian, man, he's writing these incredible songs, and he's kind enough to bring me into the picture. And
He's a fantastic artist. To have this is a great duo.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it does have that little grunge feel to it, that Western Lords of the Sun. I'm thinking hippie vibes, like Seattle, North Cali vibes with that.
Yeah, totally.
But that's cool, man. So
a little southern rock too.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're in what, four different bands, right?
Well, 5 now with 5 last year, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
How do you manage that? What is it? Are you guys recording throughout the year? What's up? How are you managing that type of?
So it's funny. I get asked this question a lot, and I think it's not as crazy as people think, you know? As a drummer, you know, like I have to remember, you know, rhythmic melodies, right? Patterns, tempos, arrangements, right? If I was a guitar player and I had to remember, you know, chords and, you know, lyrics for each of these bands, it might be a little bit more difficult. But also, like, each band is not, you know, 100% active all of the time. So,
Gotcha.
you know, for me, it kind of, it's like a cyclical, seasonal kind of thing. You know what I mean? Baychester really picks up a lot in the summertime. We get a lot of work out in New Hampshire, Vermont. We might play a gig in the city very rarely. Conversing, you know, we're in Jimmy Ryan's in the Bronx just about every month. Drew, you know, we just put out a record before the pandemic, and we haven't played, you know, many gigs. We're just kind of coming off of a 5-year hustle and grind where we were playing shows constantly and recording. So, you know, kind of taking time back to focus on family and health and life. So, you know, it's not all full on all at once.
A phrase that you had used when we first had this conversation about doing this episode, you said you wanted to showcase, and I quote this, the Bronx is not just buildings and bodegas. And it's something that's stuck with me since that phone call. And, you know, I know you love to go on your hikes, you like to ride your bike, you like to go to the parks around the Bronx.
Totally.
What does that phrase mean to you? You know, is that something you want to showcase? Like, we're not just this picture, we're more.
So this is it, we're out here on the Greenway. At this point, I usually turn off my music and just try to be present, you know? I look at the water and just feel the calmness kind of wash over me, you know? I also have a rule when I come out here, whenever I do something like this and I come out to a green space, and that's that I don't use my phone for BS, right? So what does that mean? That means I'm not on social media, I'm not checking email, I'm not playing games. You know, if I do use my phone, it's to call somebody, you know what I mean? It's to tell somebody I miss them, or to you know, catch up with a friend or a family member. But you know, it's super important, you know, turn your music off and just enjoy the sounds. I want people to acknowledge that it's the concrete jungle, right? But it's much more, you know, and the Bronx particularly, look, I'm not like a statistician, I'm not the data guy, right? So don't quote me on the numbers, but you know, from what I understand, the Bronx, at least a quarter of our land is open space, most of it occupied by New York City parks. And we have like an insane number of parks. You know, you got Soundview, Woodlawn, Van Cortlandt, Pelham Bay Park in itself, what we'll visit later, is like 2,700 acres. Orchard Beach is in there, you know, City Island. You know, these are all places that, like, when the city becomes too much and when it becomes too overwhelming and you can't take the heaviness of it all, it's dense, it's a lot, you know? I think the Bronx has all of these resources that you can find refuge, you know? And for me, that's huge. You know, I work in the South Bronx, and, you know, I have a job where, you know, I'm giving back to my community, but it's very taxing, you know? So when I come home, I almost need that. I need to be around trees. I need to kind of decompress. I need to be around water, like I said, and that really helps me just, you know, kind of make sense of it all and get ready to step back into the grind the next.
Moving away from vintage records and one beautiful custom arcade station, Danny's studio portrayed a more focused tone. Audio equipment alongside an electronic drum kit. It was here we'd get a rare look into the thought process behind his artistry.
Welcome to my studio space. This is the lab. Every musician should have some form of a laboratory to work out of, right? It doesn't have to be so grandiose, you work with what you have. But for me, this is where I come to, you know, to just work it out. I'm working out stresses in my life. I'm celebrating successes in my life. I am studying. I'm practicing for a whole range of things, right? So again, this is just where you let it all out. drums for me, they're a musician that really represents communication, right? The drum is probably one of the oldest instruments, right? Besides your voice, right? The drum is one of the oldest instruments for communication. So when I'm sitting behind the drums, I'm thinking about all those things. Maybe not all the time, but I'm definitely acknowledging that it's a connection to ancestry. It's a connection to humanity, right? So an example of that would be, back in the day, human, prehistory, right? Before telephones, right? How would you communicate with another group of people or another tribe that's, pretty far away from you? How would you communicate something like invaders, or, we just had a successful hunt, or whatever, right? Maybe you have a signal on the drums, right? Coming from one direction, and then you get a response, right? Now we know we're talking, right? So literally, it goes from that all the way fast forward to, thinking about rhythms from different cultures and different parts of the world. When I hear rhythms, to me, they're like, they're very tangible. They're like shapes. They're almost like people, right? And again, we use it as communication. So if I want to make you feel a certain way, I can communicate that feeling through the drums, right? If I want to make you feel relaxed, I might play something like this. If I want to influence you in a certain way, right? If I want to communicate a feeling that I'm feeling of maybe relaxation building into tension, I can create those feelings on the drums, right? Right now you might feel cool, you might feel like you're walking down the block on a breezy day, but you might get a phone call that's stressing you out. You might be trying to rush for that bus. Now you caught the bus, you chilling, right? We're back to that relaxed feel. So that's just one example of how, the drums dynamically, can create, feelings within you. And that's basically what I'm thinking about when I'm playing with bands, right? And I'm watching people in a crowd. I'm trying to communicate whatever the band is trying to get across. Are we anxious? Are we confident? Are we kind of a little more vulnerable, So that's one thing that's really cool. And then another thing that I'm always kind of keen to is rhythms from different geographic locations, right? So just like you might have a different language, English, Spanish, German, or whatever, what have you, music is kind of the same way, right? There's musical dialect. So here in the West, if I played a beat like this is something you might recognize as like, pop song, right? Or, right? If we move over to the Caribbean side of things, you might feel that more like this. Right? Or the Latin side of things gets a little more busy. Latin is all syncopation and, again, different roles in the drums creating this rhythmic texture, this rhythmic cocktail. Serve whatever artist I'm playing for selflessly, right? So yeah, like as a musician, you want to swag out, you want to you want to sing your song, but you got to realize that your role, especially as a drummer, is to make that artist who you're performing for feel secure and feel great. Like you want them to be on stage or in the studio and feel like the badass that they are. And the only way to do that is to really approach it really selflessly. So writing drums, it's funny, I feel like a lot of the music just writes itself. People come to me with like pretty much, complete pieces of music, and it's just my role to figure out how I fit in, So it's a lot less of me trying to build things from the ground up and me just trying to add whatever flavor needs to be there. Serving. It's all about the collective.
So when you're doing drums for artists and other bands, one of my favorite performances of you is when you perform with Zayai and Brian and Durier. Now, did you consider that a whole different animal? Because now you're doing live backing for like hip hop and rap, as opposed to like conversing Lords of the Sun.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't consider it a whole different animal, but the same approach. You know what I mean? I'm serving Zayai. Like he's already an amazing performer. He has, an amazing ability to control a crowd. He just has a presence about him and energy. And when I go into sets with him, my whole mindset is, how do I set him off? How do I make him feel secure? I don't ever want an artist to do this. To look back at me and be like, yo, what are you doing? Yeah. Mocha does that to me all the time. I want to see them dancing. I want to see, from a drummer's seat, you're kind of like in the captain's chair, and a lot of what I do too is like I'm watching the artist that I'm playing with and making sure that they're comfortable and that they're vibing. I'm also looking at people, you know what I mean? I'm looking at people interact with each other, you know what I mean? I'm looking at people dance and vibe out, and I'll focus in on that for a little bit. I'll kind of get a vibe of the room, and then I'll come back into myself. But it's very like, super attentive, just kind of paying attention to everything, and then trying to stay grounded because it's so much, you know what I mean? So much information.
You consider yourself the general on that stage?
It depends on the situation, right? Because if I'm playing with Conversing with Oceans, the general is our backing tracks, to be honest.
Really?
And my approach with Conversing with Oceans is I feel like I'm a second drummer. I almost feel like I'm a timbale player or like a percussionist, you know what I mean? And I'm trying to not play exactly what his MIDI tracks are. I'm trying to complement and compromise.
What is music without tradition? Are we allowed to follow our path without the culture and humility that shape our identity? Or are we vulnerable to embrace them? For Danny Castro, before the influences of rock and roll, they were the sounds of the streets. The Afro-Latino and Caribbean roots that danced through every beat and percussive sound to his music. I had the pleasure of experiencing a quick tour of Danny's personal studio, his humble approach to music, percussion, and even a personal touch with our Latin roots.
My pops, I have him to thank. This was my first instrument, and it was because of him. He was super into Afro-Cuban music, instruments, Latin jazz, and salsa. So this was something that I was exposed to at a very early age. And oftentimes when people ask me, how did I start playing drums or how long have you been playing, I tell them I was baptized in rhythm. You know what I mean? I was sitting at gongas before I could speak, really. And absolutely, it's part of our culture, and
absolutely,
I would love to play something with you.
You like? Do I get to play this?
Yeah.
Oh, Danny Castro. Okay, I like this.
I'll
start off like this, and then you pull something together, and then we'll rock out.
Yeah, man, for the culture, let's do it.
Let's do it. That was cool.
When you play in a band, you have to realize that, you know, there are situations throughout a song or a set when I might be a general, you might be the general, and then him. You know, it's a selfless kind of dance. You know, it's kind of like, you know, how you would see the Harlem Globetrotters passing a basketball around, right? Like, okay, dude, I'm doing my thing. Now it's your turn. You know, we all have to hold each other up as a support system. So, yeah, selflessness is a huge part of my playing. You know.
When did you start getting introduced to music in general? You know, what inspired you to get into this amazing, incredible, sometimes crazy field of this industry?
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you a quick story about like a defining moment in my childhood when I realized music was it for me. Because, you know, I grew up in a musical family, lots of musicians in my family, and then people who don't play instruments themselves, just appreciators of music, right? So I was always exposed to, you know, different kinds of art and music, and that was always a big part of my life. But, you know, when I was a kid, I was interested in tons of stuff, like drawing, video games, sports, kind of a jack of all trades. Music for sure. I was playing drums when I was little, but it wasn't like the be all end all for me, right?
Yeah.
So one day, it's kind of embarrassing, but I'm sitting in my room and I'm listening to a Backstreet Boys CD.
Okay.
You know, real talk,
as we all did.
Exactly, you know what I mean? I was, you know, elementary school. I think that Millennium album had just came out, right? Whatever, right? So I'm listening to that. My brother was with me at the time. He was living with us at the time. He's older than I am. He comes into my room and he's like, "Yo, bro, let me ask you to take that CD out of your stereo, and I want you to put this in, right?" I was like, "Okay, cool." The record that he gave me was Jimi Hendrix, "Are You Experienced?" And the song was fire. And when I heard Mitch Mitchell play drums on this song, it changed my life. It changed my life because before that, like, I'd never heard production from the 70s, you know what I mean? That was just so raw and human, right? Mm-hmm. The contrast of going from something like the Backstreet Boys, which is, you know, very, you know, super produced and super polished and great in its own right, to hearing, you know, Mitch Mitchell rip on Jimi Hendrix song, and it just sounds like a ravenous animal behind a drum set. And that kind of raw intensity, I'm still chasing it to this day, and it's something that, like, it excites me when I hear music that has humanity in it. You know what I mean? That's what I want to hear it's what excites me about music. It excites me when I hear people taking risks, when I hear people being vulnerable on a track, you know? Perfection is, you know, it's not something I'm interested in, for sure.
Wow.
Yeah, so Jimi Hendrix, one of your first albums you listened to in the 70s. From there, where was your musical approach from that point? Did you go into Latin? Did you go into more soul, more rock? Like, what was your other music discoveries that led you to your influences?
Sure. I think this is where growing up in the Bronx in New York City was also super beneficial to me, because I'm just swimming in a sea of diverse music and culture all the time, right? Growing up in the early 90s and the 2000s, you know, obviously you can't walk down the street without being exposed to hip hop and R&B, right? So that's a big part of it. Just, you know, being in the park and hearing Funkmaster Flex in the summertime and Biggie and all of the reggae dance hall that you hear coming out of people's cars and windows and the South Side, right? Like these are the sounds of the streets. So I was always exposed to that, even if I wasn't directly ingesting it. And then K-Rock was a huge part of my life, right? So, you know, any band that was played on 90s radio, you know, I was jamming with. You know, I'm 30 years old now, so when I was, you know, in 4th or 5th grade, nu metal was at its height. So, you know, the first record that I ever bought with my own money was Korn, Follow the Leader. You know, it is what it is.
You know, I love how you said the Bronx is two sides. You know, there's people experiencing this way of life and then another way of life, and possibly even more. when it comes to FLC, which, you know, again, shaped you, shaped me, and most of the people in our, you know, in our groups, I feel like it's a lot of people didn't know that Bronx Underground FLC was a thing. It was like this other side to the Bronx that people didn't know about. Like if you knew, you knew.
Sure.
And it was this little secret where it grew and people became family in and of itself. You know, long long friendships, and it's really incredible how many people it's affected. And it's part of the Bronx music scene, you know, whether people know about it or not. You know, it's so expansive.
You know, if you fail to explore and you fail to kind of get into the nitty gritty and see, you know, the people who are trying to make the best of what they have, like you're really missing out on an entire culture, an entire scene. And that's kind of what happened with the Bronx Underground. You know what I mean? For us, it was so big and it really was, but also, you know what I mean? Like in the grand scheme of things, it was a secret. Like a lot of people, when you ask them, hey, the Bronx has a scene, they'd be like, what?
Like, what are
You
you
go
talking
to
about?
shows where? In the basement of a church? Okay.
So I was the same when you told me that. You know,
There you go, yeah.
But I think it also comes down to your upbringing and what you're exposed to.
Yeah.
I think it's very profound you getting that Jimmy record first, as opposed to, let's say, a hip hop record first. So let's say like a heavy metal record first, right? Like I think your influences also shape where you go on in life as well. Excuse me, because like Bronx Underground is so like we talked about this before.
Yeah.
It's so not quote unquote Bronx, right? If you're not from the Bronx, you wouldn't picture that type of music, hardcore scene, new metal scene being a part of the borough, but it was, and it still is.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, having your influence that you had, you know, you gravitated towards that. And I think that's something that I think what we're trying to do in this docu-series as well is kind of educate people as well that there's more than just what you see about the Bronx. And I think you emulate that perfectly. Everyone else that we met in this episode has that.
I can't be held responsible for you. And when I see you, I know what you're up to. You see me drinking by myself, you know just how to